This is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Shripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education, such as MoneyTap, Happy, MFine. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in. Today I have with me Jishnu Bhattacharjee, Managing Director at Nexus Venture Partners. Jishnu has an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business, an MS in Electrical Engineering from Georgia Tech, and BTech from IIT Kharagpur. Jishnu has invested in software and technology infrastructure, data and AI, and is interested in a wide range of startups. Jishnu currently is involved in board roles at Druva, Postman, H2O.ai, Rancher Labs, Headspin, Observe.AI, Blue Shift, HelpShift, Kaltura, and various other companies. His investments also include Mezi, which was acquired by American Express, Cloud.com, which was acquired by Citrix, Gluster, acquired by Red Hat, Arkin by VMware, and Elasticbox, acquired by CenturyLink. Welcome, Jishnu, to the podcast.
Thank you, Siddharth, for having me.
Jishnu, we would love to know about your journey, how you got started in venture capital.
Yeah, as you know, a lot of things happen by serendipity. So yeah, I mean, going back, and I will try to kind of uh, cover briefly. Back in 2000, I did my undergrad from Kharagpur, IIT Kharagpur, and then went to do my PhD in Georgia Tech. And yeah, if at the time, like any of my classmates would have to guess what I might end up doing, I think you will get 90% answer as I would be a professor. And that's kind of like how my orientation has been as I grew up and all that. And then at Georgia Tech, like some great things happened. I was fortunate to get hear from and attend classes from stalwarts, like who define fields like signal processing and all that. My field was electronics and communications and those kind of stuff. So those also led me to kind of guess and kind of assess myself, like am I going to be at that level? Like the philosophy is like if I'm doing something, do I have a shot to excel? That and then also started retrospection on what I'm good at, and some things, as they say, it happens. So I was well into my PhD, a lot of papers and all that. So as I was doing that, I got a call from someone in Silicon Valley saying that, hey, I have read your paper, and I have just, and this was right after 9/11, uh, and so 2001 fall, or kind of Q4 of 2001, and he said, hey, I have just raised money from Kleiner Perkins or someone, and another fund. And I didn't know any of those things, but then he said that, hey, it's only two of us, and we are looking to bring in someone who would define a lot of our architectures and our engineering. And I saw your paper, and I see you have been driving ideas to papers. How about you drive ideas to products? So that was the pitch that kind of like got me excited, and so I moved here. So that company was Intera Networks. It was started
And
by
you
one.
dropped your PhD for
I
that.
I took sabbatical. And but as it happens that whenever you take sabbatical, or at least take a break, probably your
Yeah,
life moves to different dimensions.
yeah. Even Larry Page and Sergey Brin never completed their PhD, I think, after they took sabbatical.
Yeah, and I don't know whether the reasons are. I mean, they had really compelling reasons as they to build $1 trillion company. I don't know if the
Yeah.
reasons are comparable or not, but yes, if you tell me a PhD dropout, I mean that sometimes adds maybe another line item on the resume. So yeah, you can tell me that. So and then I this was a startup. It was a very interesting startup. We were in. I mean, I was deep in engineering, as deep as it can get, and we were building electronics for optical and wireless communication. I was deep in physical layer, designing all the systems, communication systems, silicon on silicon, and integrated circuits and those kind of stuff. So I was the first engineer to be hired there, member of the founding team. I mean, I was called founding engineer and whatnot. I was not a co-founder, but it was really great experience to be working at that level, and then kind of like learning each day new day. And got deeply kind of, I would say, started appreciating the startup culture. So I was there for about like few years, and then it turned out that we had great technology, but we were ahead in market. We ended up selling the company, which was okay. Like that company became public and all that. So, but after 3 years, I moved on. I went to a bigger company. I kind of figured out I am not cut out for big company job. I thought, okay, let me do something else, and I ended up going to business school. So as I was doing, that was like circa 2006 to 2008, I was in business school, and as I was going through business school, some one venture capitalist from the Valley pinged me because he was looking for somebody deep in tech who can hopefully also appreciate business. That's how he approached me. That's how he says that hey, it seems you definitely have very good tech jobs, and I'm assuming you appreciate business because you're in business school. So I started kind of getting a flair of venture capital because he was looking for some diligence help and all that with some of the deep tech startups he was doing. And through that, I got, I think 2007, end of 2007, I got connected through him. I got connected to Naren, co-founder of Nexus, and Nexus actually just started in 2007 at the time. And I didn't, like, when I got connected, I didn't know that, because I was not told that Naren started a fund or something. I was told that Naren is one of the smartest uh, persons in Silicon Valley. I said, wow, that's a
Yeah.
great, great guy. I have to meet this man. And that's how I met him. And of course, like, I mean, I was blown away when I met, just kind of like, I mean, as they say, there is people, I mean, success is great. Humility is great or greater, but humility after success, nothing beats that, and very uncommon. And that's what Naren exempl, like, at the first get go when I met him, like, this is what jumped out. And I say that there is complete resonance of my way of life and somebody who has kind of like achieved so much in his career and that kind of stuff. So I think that was one. And then also it has so happened, since I'm in the journey, probably it's an interesting anecdote. So me along with a couple of other teammates from business school, they so three of us were looking to do an e-commerce business in India. Believe it or not, it
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
2007, and the e-commerce was little different. So that startup was called Cash Cow with a Q, and the idea was we will use the cyber cafes in India as cash collection center, and
Okay.
kind of like try to do e-commerce there because there was no internet connectivity at that time. Mobile was weak and all that. Now, as we did field studies, we kind of came to the conclusion it was probably not the best of the idea. But of course, I mean, this was like probably at the time when Sachin and Binny started thinking of e-commerce. So clearly,
Yeah.
we didn't have the entrepreneurial like genes at that level, because after we kind of did field study and all that, we kind of came to the conclusion it's not going to be easy to pull off. That didn't pan out. But what happened interestingly is that through that, I got connected to Suvir, who is
Okay.
other co-founder of Nexus, and I
Yeah.
didn't know at that time. It was like amazing. I didn't know at that time Naren and Suvir were co-founders. It happened kind of like in almost same time. So yeah, though the startup didn't pan out, I guess they liked me enough and I liked them enough, and we did. Honestly, to your question, I didn't know whether venture is for me at that time. I mean, I was always an operator. I went to business school to start a company. I was trying
Yeah.
out many different things, but they were all entrepreneurs, and I thought that and they said also, hey, get started, do what you want, and if you think entrepreneurship is your calling and you are starting a company, we'll back you if you feel that you so it was great. So 2008 I graduated and I joined Nexus. This was 1 year after. So first investment in Nexus started in 2007, uh, I think early 2007, and I joined 1 year after after the fund started. So that's how my venture capital journey began, and I guess one thing led to the other, and I'm blessed to have chosen VC venture capital as my job. I think it's extremely extremely rewarding in terms of the satisfaction and the impact that you can have, and also just this opportunity to be able to work with some of the exceptional people in many different dimensions. Of course, their capability, their entrepreneurs, and also great human beings, and also directly or indirectly having influence in creating something meaningful, changing people's lives. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have had my last 12 years in any different way.
Fantastic. And Jishnu, within Nexus, you chose SaaS, right? How did it happen? Like you chose to focus only
Yeah,
on
so it's correct. A very good question. And at that time, SaaS was anything but a category which was possible out of India. So if you
yeah,
look at from the beginning, the inspiration, one of the core inspiration of Nexus was we saw India as a hybrid of China and Israel.
yeah,
In China, if you look at like bulk of and maybe 100% of value creation happen domestically, which is even true today. Like
yeah,
and that's whereas in Israel, almost 100% of value creation happens internationally. Companies starting out of Israel, and they have done like amazing job. And at that time, we saw India as a potential blend of two, where there is huge domestic market when you talk about technology enabled innovations in consumers and businesses. At the same time, because of the talent that has happened, software talent in India, and for last 2 3 decades, starting from 80s, India has created a lot of IT services companies, and that has led to a lot of you know know-how of software know-how, I would say, in the country. We should be able to build product companies, software product companies out of India, addressing global markets. So that was the inspiration with which Nexus started. And in fact, if you look at even before I started doing it, actually our first, I mean, I love to think that how we kind of thought about it and how we pioneered this, so to say, cross-border SaaS category. The first investment that Nexus made was in early 2007 in a company called DimDim, which would have been Zoom. Like if you look at that,
okay,
was exactly Zoom prior to Zoom. The idea was, WebEx and others didn't have the experience, and this gentleman out of Hyderabad started this company, and we sold in 2011 when Zoom started. So in a way, we say that we actually sold the karma. Like we had the karma that that kind of led to somebody else
yeah,
grow, take on that, and then of course the rest is history. But that kind of tells us, and we actually sold him to Salesforce, and it's just
yeah,
that we sold too early and all that. So but that tells you about the inspiration that we had. And then we also invested in a company called Pubmatic, that was before I joined,
yeah,
which was out of Pune. So we had that thing. So it is not that so we knew that we are doing something. But yes, when I joined in, it was not clear what exactly would be meaningful in India. And one thing we knew, that India has to be an IP-led superpower. It cannot just IP services. They have built great things. I mean, in India has built great things, but that cannot be a sustainable advantage going forward. So
yeah,
that's why one thing we decided is that we are not going to invest in any IT services company, which was a very different kind of step and decision compared to any other fund in India at the time, any other fund. So I think those kind of decisions paid off. And then the other interesting thing would be, so when I started out, that is circa 2008, I started thinking, what makes sense here, right? At the end of the day, okay, SaaS is SaaS, but it's like huge category, and what would make sense or what not. And that was the time also. What happened is that AWS cloud was just started to happen.
yeah,
And in India, if you look at, it was like most of the businesses were being done in pen and paper, and there was no legacy. There was not like a lot of on-premise installations and not on-premise tech and all that was going on. So in a way, we thought that cloud adoption in India is even more natural. And for even for Indian entrepreneurs, if cloud picks up, the cost to build a startup and the time to market and all that can all be faster. So that kind of, we got some inspiration. I wouldn't say we knew a whole lot, but our inspiration was this movement of cloud is going to accelerate
yeah,
technology startup creation out of India. So that kind of and that led to a lot of things. And then at the end of the day, as much as like we are very bottom up investors, by that what do we mean is that as much we think of sectors, we don't go by sectors. We try to meet exceptional entrepreneurs, learn from them, and try to kind of add fuel to the realization of their vision and partner with them, right? So through that, I mean, we started meeting great companies, great entrepreneurs, and like the very first investment that have done is a company called Gluster, which was the first storage being offered on software, leveraging cloud. I mean, those kind of things. I mean, it's like, and he's an entrepreneur. He had his first. He's an open source company. He had his first journey foray. Gluster actually started. It kind of pivoted in different ways, but it started in Bangalore. Then he moved to California, and he was doing, building a supercomputer in Berkeley. Actually, Berkeley had a project. Not He was not a student there, but he was building. I think it was called Thunder or something. And then, when he started building, he had this a very small shop, a very small office in Bangalore, where he had, like, a set of five really passionate engineers, and started building this. And we got to meet him, and we thought instantly. I mean, they were like, he was trying out. That was the time when it was not easy to raise funds anyway. I remember 24 VCs passed, saying that, I mean, you are smoking, nobody can build storage in software and all that. And we thought totally opposite. And Naren and I invested in the company. That was my first investment, VC investment. This was kind of like, we ended up writing the term sheet. I still remember October of
Yeah.
2008. So things like that, and then, of course, I mean, many things happened over the last 12 years, and one thing led to the other.
So, Jishnu, one of the company which clearly, stands out among your wonderful portfolio is Postman, right? Because
Yes.
many of your companies have gone IPO, many have been acquired at a very high valuation, but Postman certainly stands out, right? So when you invested in Abhinav and his co-founders, so what was it, that spark which you spotted at that point in time?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's very different.
Yeah, no, very, very different. I will talk to that. Just yeah, several companies. I'm looking forward to IPOs in coming months and days. IPOs haven't happened yet. Yes, there has been fantastic acquisitions, but I think the next leg is IPOs, and I think, you will see several IPOs for companies being built out of India in the coming, let's say 12 to 24 months. So yeah, I mean, very, very exciting times ahead. Now, coming to Postman, yeah, I mean, that exemplifies. I would say Postman is very unique. By the way, it's very, very outlier company, very unique, and it
Yeah.
also exemplifies, I would say, the kind of companies we want to do, and also the kind of, like, the ways we connect with entrepreneurs. So let me give you the background. Actually, we first got to know about Postman through one of our companies.
Okay.
It's called Index, which we
Okay.
bagged, and the founder there, and one of the founders, who is the engineering founder, he actually told us that, hey, this is a life changer, lifesaver for me, and you should find out, like, who is building it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you should get connected. So that's
Yeah.
that's how we first got the inspiration, like the inkling that, that this there is something here. Now two things, I would say, came about together. One is the fact that somebody just built, and when we talked, like, at that time itself, it was, he built something very simple, which
Yeah.
he did to solve his pain point. He was a developer, and he was dealing with APIs and APIs. The core part about what he was building is that, like, API is something that you start building, but it is somebody else who has built. So if that API doesn't work, then your code doesn't work, but for no fault of yours. So it is very important that whatever you are doing, you, on the ongoing basis, you are being able to test it out and know that, hey, because this is an external dependency in some ways. So that's what he identified, he solved, and he released it as open source. And it turned out that tens of thousands of people at that time across the world were using it, right? So that's, and this was circa to 2014. And the second was, we were deep into, because we started doing cloud investments. We did actually a lot of open source investments. So we understood developers, we understood kind of bottom up method of building companies, building software. So we resonated with what he is doing is kind of in line with the inflection points we are seeing in the technology, because that's how codes will be built. It will People will not start just building software from codes, but rather they will start kind of uh, just taking in, because API is a way of making another service or another code which has been already built. How do you make that available and be used by somebody else? It's kind of Lego blocks. You don't have to worry about the content inside the Lego blocks. Rather, you just focus on the interfaces. So that's what API enables. So we had that inspiration, and then we saw this thing, and then Abhinav is exceptional. Like whoever meets Abhinav, I mean, there is an element about him which is very, and again, no, like very very substance oriented. I mean, no kind of he is understated, and I mean, this just resonated with our culture, I would say, very much. I mean, so it was a no brainer. So to point to so we knew that instantly when we connected, we knew we have to work with, and that's how kind of and this has been a fantastic thing. See, that other thing also in Nexus, I will absolutely like to highlight. Almost all our investments have been fantastic teamwork. We do not consider like this investment is his or this investment is somebody else's. Rather, it is Nexus investment, and that also Postman exemplifies a lot. Like the first from Index, the person who told us about Postman, he told this to Samir. Uh, Gradually, well, I think in the next day itself, like we didn't, of course, we knew that something there, we didn't waste time. I jumped in. We did the very first investment when it happened. It was just a seed. In fact, the company was not even incorporated, if I'm not mistaken. Then we put in some seed money. They came in to our office in Bangalore, where they started working in. And then kind of I mean, one thing led to the other. It was just like, we gave a 1 million seed and we said, don't worry about it. Just get started. So, I mean, get started means they already got started, but I'm saying like, now they, formed build a company and all that, and we helped with all these things. So yes, and then along the way, actually both, and this is we very strongly collaborated both in India and US, because that's our one model, right? As you might know, Nexus is one integrated fund across US and India, and which is so important here because our incentives are totally aligned. It's very different from the other funds who have mothership in US and India fund in India. That is very very so this is also another conscious decision we have taken, which creates overhead. It's not easy to kind of do. I mean, these are all like type A plus personalities being kind of working together in one structure, one investment committee, one fund, one outlook, so those things have also helped us to be able to foster this cross border category.
And Jishnu, as you rightly pointed out, Nexus is the only fund, I believe, which invests in India and US across within the from the same fund. It doesn't
Correct.
differentiate, right? And the same investment team which evaluates between India and US
That's
for
correct.
for, for every opportunity, right? And other thing to highlight is the serendipity which you discovered Postman has also been the serendipity how Nexus discovered White Hat Junior.
Very much, very much,
Like,
and it's just like and we want to kind of do that more, because at the end of the day, and that I think the other thing is that always keeping an open mind. We honestly we have our sector understanding or whatever. I mean, we of course do our analysis so that our sparks are there. So it's kind of like we try to keep ourselves, you call it like, let's say, prepared, or kind of like
yeah,
this thing, but we are not like running after these categories,
yeah,
because many of these there won't even be a category when will somebody meet. Like in fact for white hat also, right? If you look at, nobody thought that coding can be a category, like
yeah. It was not a market
teaching
when
coding.
you
Yeah,
invested.
exactly, so exactly, but there were signs. And more importantly, like how the entrepreneur was thinking, like can we think as the entrepreneur is thinking, is there a resonance, right? And can we think that can we be 1 plus 1 much more than 1, once we kind of partner. So I think that philosophy has been very helpful, and we definitely want to continue and in fact build on that and foster that.
And tell us, more about the Postman, because specifically it's a very different kind of SaaS which you have invested. It's community SaaS, I would call it, rather than traditional SaaS. How would you classify in those buckets any SaaS investment which you are evaluating?
So if you look at, right, I mean, there are couple. So one is the underlying commonality of any investment we want to do. The underlying commonality and the spark that we look for is product first thinking. Like,
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that somebody, we have even invested in companies which are in PowerPoint or sometimes even pre-PowerPoint. So it's not that
yeah,
somebody has to have a product, but it is very important that they're thinking product and technology first, which
yeah,
means that at the end of the day, like, talk about Druva, for example. There was, and I will come back to Postman in a second. But
yes,
to drive that point of product, like when I invested in Druva, I mean, that was the follow in 2011, which was like, in today's terminology, that will be Series A, and Sequoia did seed. I mean, though at
yeah,
that time it was called Sequoia Series A and now Series B, but it was very much like kind of smaller Series A rounds compared to what is happening today. Now, at
yeah,
that time, he had this product, Jaspreet and Milind, they had this product which was actually being used. Like, their bookings was very less. Like, the revenue was probably hardly 500K ARR or something like that, or even
yeah.
less. But the product was being used in 26 countries. And many of
Okay.
them didn't even talk to Jasprit or Milind. They got that product at that time, it was pre-cloud. So
Yeah,
for their product. So they got that product, they will download it and they will use it. And there were some, early cloud services and all that. But the idea is what? They were handling the product and they were using it. So that mindset, whoever can think of that, the product can be self-serve, has very so we want every product to be built that way. Now, that doesn't mean that every product can be sold totally self-serve. There has to be what we call sales serve component in many cases, and sometimes, their sales efforts would need to start early enough. I mean, granted, the founder themselves, himself or herself, will have to do the selling initially, not like, by hired salespeople.
yeah.
So there is this concept of self-serve product and and self-serve GTM. I think our philosophy is that every product should be self-serve in a way that, if somebody gets handed the product, they should be able to get value of the product in like out of the product in like next 30 minutes. So there shouldn't be any kind of like, all the sophistication has to be buried underneath. The user experience has to be as simple and the value should be as kind of tangible and very first time to gratification. So that's what we look for. Now, of course, in Postman's case, what happened is that not only so that was at such a level that, it was so easy to use. It was a very simple focused product, but at the same time, people just loved the product so much that they started spreading it all by themselves. So for a long time in the company, actually, even today, we don't have any like dedicated salesperson. I mean, we have started building, like, after 3 years, we started building business teams where we had marketing, we had customer success, and people who have started using them. Then they started paying them. We would call them up and explain some of the other things that Postman can do, and they might pay even more. So those motions
Yeah.
started happening a lot later. But for the first 3 years, there was not a single, like, there was not even like, there was some marketing activities, but nothing with respect to anything, with related to sales that you can say. So it was everything self-serve, both self-serve product and self-serve go-to-market, which is like, which is very uncommon. And what you call community SaaS, I mean, other way to look at it is that, for them, it is kind of developer SaaS, where you are. So there are three distinct components, right? Product, community, and customers.
Yeah.
So product and community was leading to customers, rather than, you thinking about customers from the beginning.
Yeah.
So that was Postman, and rightfully so. What they also do in the first 3 years, they didn't even think of, like, 2014 we invested that seed money, and that we rolled it into 2015. End of 2015, we led our Series A. Uh, and we were the only investor till that time. And then, from there to till 2017, we didn't really have any thinking on monetization and stuff like that. I mean, we did invest in marketing, and thoughtful marketing, and kind of built out different things. Like those were also product led. Even our marketing was also very much driven by the product. It is kind of inbuilt in product and that kind of stuff. So we really invested in the product and community. Users, steadily, users always steadily kept on growing. Like when we invested, it was like tens of thousands of users. At this point, as we talk about, it's 12 million plus users. So 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 yeah so so that way, very. And then when in, I think, 2017, end of 2017, when we started monetizing and really thinking through all these things, after that till date also, everything has been bottom up. Like, I mean, our CAC is zero, customer acquisition cost is zero. I mean, now we ended up also doing a bigger round, not because we needed the money. I mean, total in the company we raised maybe 200 odd million. Almost 100% of the money is still in the bank. So
Wow.
it's a very kind of unique situation here. And of course, that doesn't mean that we'll not be using the money. I mean, there are multiple things that is going on, and we'll figure out, like, what is the best way to use the money and all that. But it's a very unique situation that, the company has grown, first product, then the community came in and they started paying us, and now the customers are growing. Now we have bigger accounts. All these things happen very kind of organically, so to say. And we brought in people to help it. Customer success in such situations become very, very important, because once people start using, you need to kind of connect with. And honestly, the culture in Postman is such that the customer success, customer support were all done for quite some time, for a long time, by the founders themselves. And even now, actually, I mean, the idea is basically, everybody stands by. I mean, if what you are building has to be used and appreciated, and you are responsible for that. I mean, the culture is that, we do not depend on a separate QA team and all that. I mean, there might be some functionalities which are being done, and there are some this thing, but every engineer who builds would need to stand by the quality, because without that, there is no product. Like, just building some features and releasing it doesn't mean anything, right? So it's inbuilt into company culture, very much, like standing by customers and making sure that, they're getting the value out of it. Because the core is that, if you are delivering real value, you will be able to create real value. You can define, what will you monetize, how much will you monetize. That will evolve over time. All these things can be done intelligently by thinking intelligently about go to market and monetization. But all these things has to follow delivering real value, not before that. If you don't deliver real value, you don't deserve to ask for real value, right? So you have to deliver value, and then only you can expect to be compensated for that.
Jishnu, so please help me understand. Like, you have taken two examples, Druva and Postman. It's very rare that the customer adoption in SaaS happens without a sales and a marketing team, right? If you can share what were those key things in the product that led to other users leading on to other users to use it?
So, and it's great. Two examples are very good, because two has very different motions. Um, Talking about Druva, that I would say is more like what you would expect in general for a company, product first company. So to what they did is they had a very, very easy to use product that people could use. And they did a lot of, like, their process was through like Google search. I think people would find through Google search, and then they will use it. And they started, and when they started seeing that people are initially downloading and using it, those were in department levels. They invested in sales, first inside sales out of India. And then right after we invested, Jasprit, we helped Jasprit move to US, and then start building out the sales organization from there. Initially it was inside sales, but gradually we started kind of like, going up. Like, if more departments within organizations were using, then it was bubbling up to the CIO's radar, and we were doing then enterprise sales, and we were kind of building out the entire kind of like, marketing engine, sales machinery, and all that. So that was kind of Dhruva's journey. And of course, Dhruva has grown very big, and hopefully, like, in coming year or two, we can take the company public. Whereas on Postman, if you look at, that is a very different motion, where the product was such that, first of all, the need was very acute. What Abhinav landed up to, like, Abhinav, Ankit, and Abhijit solved it for them, right? First, and then they released it, and it turned out that people were searching for such kind of stuffs. I mean, it was just it was perfect storm, so to say, you know where people just started using it, and once they started using it, it just spread. So let's say, in an organization, I start using it, I am liking it, I'm first thing I'm telling about this is my colleague, and then the
Yeah.
colleague starts using, and developers usually are pretty close knit communities. I mean, they know each other, they know, kind of like, and there are also different forums which have developed over time, but it's just by nature, right? What they do and all that, there is inherent bit of that collaborative tendency. I mean, okay, collaboration will come later, but I'm saying this idea, right? Hey, I'm building this, what is a developer like me might be using. And also, there actually things move very fast, right? Like, there are always new technologies coming up, so developers by definition have to be good. Developers are always very inquisitive, and they need to understand, they need to be in the flow, right? And so that's what spread. It was pure word of mouth, and it was like, open source product. Initially, it was not even cloud, it was just
Yeah.
open source product that people used it. And that went on going one after the other. And then as things started growing, we started, I think in 2016 we launched our cloud offering. And then once we had cloud, we had a lot more data that we had, because people started using whatever they were using in Postman, and building in Postman was started residing in Postman, which we call collections, and those were all available. So we started getting actually a lot of the breadcrumbs, like lot of data, and the power, the data analytics powerhouse that we have built in house internally uh, is amazing, that we have built. And through that, what we started calling is that, we never, and then later when we started monetizing, we had this term which we said PQL, product qualified leads. Like, you will hear these things in the market, that there is MQL, then there is
Yes.
SQL
That's
and all
cool.
that. We never spoke in those terminologies. What we focused on is PQL, product qualified leads, which means who, like, really understanding, like, who are using the products, what are they using in the product, much more importantly, how are they really engaging, and what are the touch points when they get converted into paid customers. So our model was that people will start, and then there are certain things um, for which they would pay, and those were mostly in terms of usage. Like, we did not kind of wall the features. Like, everybody would get access to, even if somebody starts on Postman even today, they will get access to everything. But as they use, if their usage grow, the idea is that, then we are offering more value to you, then you should compensate us. So, or let's say, more users are coming in, because gradually collaboration, it became a collaboration platform where people collaborate on Postman. So if, like, okay, 2 to 3 users are there, that's fine. If you are adding more users, you need to pay us, right? But all those things are automated and triggered based on lots of, probably, like, hundreds and thousands of variables. So we built all those systems, and we call these product qualified leads. We have a funnel which is defined by product usage, in terms of, like, where things are, what are the touch points, and then also defining, let's say, if there are customer success people, then at what points you need those touch points, when you can kind of go, you can help them, and hopefully you can also explain them what all other things we can do, how you can increase collaboration and all that, and potentially increase the revenue that you can collect from the customers. So that's the motion that Postman has followed.
Wonderful. And how much do you think the large a company, a postman can get? Is there a cap to it?
So it's see, it's amazing how big. So if you look at what is happening, right, broadly, like, and that's where kind of the inspiration comes in, and why there is so much excitement. So if you look at today, when Postman started, initially it has been developers, right?
Yeah.
Now, developers at this point in the current counts, it will probably be whatever, like, let's say 35 million. And we have companies like GitHub, we have
Yeah.
companies like Atlassian, you know, and out of that, say one third of those are there in Postman platform. Now,
Okay.
now what has also happened, and which is extremely encouraging, and that is kind of where the technology world is also going, is many other personas, in addition to developers,
Yeah.
started using Postman. So, for example, I have other companies who are selling API as a product today,
Okay.
and the salespeople are actually showcasing their APIs on Postman platform. Because the beauty that happens is that Postman is basically the turnkey of all things API. So with the API, what you can do, what all, if you have to demonstrate what API does, if you have to demonstrate their performance, if you have to demonstrate kind of what all things you can do with API, you can do in a heartbeat. We have this concept called run in Postman. So Postman is becoming the, at this point currently we have 250 million plus APIs in Postman platform, and people are just putting in there. So you call ops people, call support people, or even sales people, they are have started using Postman. So the the whole addressable user base of Postman is growing very rapidly as we speak. And I mean, is the sky is the limit. And then other thing that happens is that if you look at what do these non-developers or non-programmers are doing with Postman, you can actually you can put together APIs without knowing coding, and that essentially works, does some function or becomes what we call headless applications. So there is no UX, but you can actually get a job done. Like you can trigger, say, if this API happens, then that, something like that, and it can be done actually very easily. So one of the vision is basically how do you make these non-programmers, convert these non-programmers into developers. So I mean, one of the vision we work on is that in the coming years, can we take this whatever 12 million to 15 million users that we have to 100 million? That is inspirational vision that drives the company. Many of the decisions that we take in the company, and this is not just kind of that, as a byproduct of that, you are actually expanding the universe of people who can touch software and can kind of build things with software significantly by order of magnitude. So that's how we are looking at it. And of course, once you kind of do it, and once you, as I said always, that if you are delivering real value to those people, uh, you will also be able to create real value.
And what is one metric that you track at Postman very closely?
Actually, two, three things. Of course, usage is extremely important. Extremely important. How, is it a daily, what we want is that, anybody who is touching Postman becomes kind of Postman is the daily navigator of people's work life.
Yeah.
So I'm coming in, I'm getting into the Postman environment and Postman platform, and then through that, everything is getting directed. Of course, we have tons and tons of integrations into Postman. We have tons and tons of integrations out of Postman, and then we become the brain, the hub. So this is number one thing that we track is usage,
Yeah.
and then of course, as users are coming in, how many new users are coming, how many how kind of existing users are becoming more kind of more engaged users, and how we then convert users to paying users and those kind of stuff. But usage is what drives us.
Fantastic. And touching upon the current valuation, like in the last round was $3.5 billion of Postman. So and there are few unicorns in your portfolio. For example, Druva, which are based on a revenue multiple of valuation. They have crossed 100 million. So how does the valuation math in Postman work?
So this, see, at the end of the day, if you look at, sometimes I see that what you can think of is a valuation as net present value of a company's potential. One
Yeah.
way to look at it, right? Now, at the end of the day, there are multiple aspects that goes on. One of the core thing, let's say, for a company like Postman that we are coming in. See, I think this is the first time probably any company in the world I know of has brought in this concept of network effects into enterprise software.
Yeah.
Because if you look at, right, what we are building is a network of developers, network of mm, beyond developers, several personas within organizations, and network of many type of organizations, because there are now 500,000 organizations who are there, and 250 million to going to I think very soon will be billion APIs plus. So around that, and it's almost like an API economy today. Like Stripe is an API company, which is like
Yeah.
30 billion plus, or Twilio is an API company, right? So it's we are living in a like API is become putting in very is gaining central stage, because that is the way by which software is getting developed in many ways. So that leads to a network effect of sorts, where subsequent users are getting more value than the previous users, or the
Yeah.
previous users value increases as more users are joining, right? That part, which we had traditionally seen in companies like Facebook, in consumer world, we are actually have started to see in the enterprise software world, right? That's what Postman brings in. So these are like some of the examples, as you can think, here. And of course, I mean, the company is growing without spending any money. I mean, I don't know very many companies which grows 3x profitably, um without like kind of you know generating cash rather than spending
Yeah.
cash. So yeah, I mean, very, it has a lot of uniqueness. And then the other thing also you have to remember, valuation is also a function of market. Somebody, uh, there will be different people who will come in and who would like to work with the company, and eventually market decides, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are kind of the dimensions, I would say.
And let's talk about one key milestone in your portfolio. I think which you aspire as a investor would be 100 million ARR. Am I
At
right?
least, at least. See,
At least.
see
Wow.
the idea is really this, right? Like, the question really, when we are going in, we always ask this question. I mean, that doesn't mean that, of course, I mean, as we all know that, as much as we would like, not all companies will get there. But the idea is that, can a company be a self-sustaining company over the decade or beyond?
Yeah.
So that's how we look at it. And then one question, as a thought experiment of that, we ask is that, can this grow into $1 billion revenue company?
Okay.
It sounds like, very very this thing. And sometimes it's actually very very difficult to even say, like, sometimes we ourselves would say that, hey, what are we talking about and all that, and how to kind of have an engaging discussion around it. But we force ourselves to that. If we are investing in a company, is there an opportunity to build $1 billion revenue company, right? And I think, that kind of teaches us also a lot of things, because of course, these are thought experiments, right? As thought experiments as it can get. But it forces us also to kind of think through, okay, what all dimensions. Of course, there are 20 different things that can go wrong, but are there two things that can go right? Can we articulate it now? And maybe that will change, but every time we should ask ourselves, what are those two things? And those two things can change as the company builds on
Yeah.
growing. So yeah, so that's how we look at it. Yeah, I mean, we are energized and inspired to build really meaningful companies that can pass the test of time.
And I think few enterprise companies, I would not say have crossed that $1 billion in ARR across the world. It would not be very
There
much
are there
very
are there are quite a few, right? Like, if you look at today, how if you look at how the prominence of SaaS is growing, how
yeah.
the entire SaaS market cap is growing. If you look at, like, the kind of companies that are being built, they're actually, yeah, they're quite, of course, I mean, by definition, I'm talking about, a very select set, very very select few. The question
Yeah.
really is that, like, we always know that, I mean, if we can get a very handful to that level, we will feel
Yes.
blessed, right? No question. But but that actually asks you, like, if somebody has to get in, like, essentially you are saying that, can a very large company, large market be created? Can there be a 10 billion plus market be created? Let's start from there, right? So those kind of things are, we find, like, very useful exercise for us. And if we can get, let's say, if we can see that there is a path to 1 billion, then I would say that our confidence level that there can be 100 million error plus company we build increases. So it's kind of like, always think of the possibilities without constraints, assuming that the company had all resources.
Yeah.
Can we think of the possibilities of what it can grow to, and what it can build? And of course, we are very patient investors. We'll take the time coefficient out, because you cannot do anything artificially. I mean,
Yeah.
it will take its natural course. There is gestation period, but
Yes.
those kind of exercise are very, very helpful, we feel, as we also help the entrepreneurs. One of the core thing that as a venture capitalist we would like to bring in is, can we expand the thinking horizon of the founders? Of course, we all say we would need to connect with people for hiring, we would like to kind of connect with customers and all that. That's fine.
Yeah.
That we have to do for day-to-day activities. But
Yeah.
the real value, because venture capital is expensive for any entrepreneur. At the end of the day, entrepreneur is building the company,
Yeah.
and it's very expensive. You're parting with your company, you're making somebody your partner,
Yeah.
by parting with valuable shares. It is not an easy decision, and they should get. That's what they should ask also. What they're getting. Sometimes I feel that entrepreneurs also just think through more, or who can connect me to this, connect me to that. These are very tactical. I would tell you, we are doing it all the time, but I think from entrepreneurs also should think of who can be that partner who would expand their thinking horizon, who would kind of who'd push them, right, to be to out of comfort zone, and along with that empathize. One cannot be kind of delusional saying that oh, you have to be that, or you have to, you have to marry that with reality, where the company is in, at what stage they are in, and help them kind of in that journey and in that progression.
And Jishnu, help me understand. When you say broadening the horizon, what does it entail to broaden the horizon of an entrepreneur? Is it how large a company can be built, or is it much more beyond that?
So we have a terminology in Nexus. What we say is that think broadly and globally, but act narrowly and locally. So the idea really is that you should always have an inspirational vision, and that will evolve over time.
Yeah.
So, for example, for me, the inspirational vision for Postman at this point is, we need to have 100 million developers,
Yeah.
100 million users. They all become developers at some point. Like, they don't need to be coders, they don't need to be programmers. But let's say 100 million plus users, right? And that will evolve. Maybe 2 years after, I will say billion.
Yeah.
That is the inspirational vision, right? What goes underneath is very, very, you have to act narrowly and kind of see, okay, given everything that you have, what are the opportunities, what are the potentials you can go to in the coming 12 months or 24 months, let's say, right? So there is always kind of a balancing act of thinking thinking broadly and acting narrowly, which
Yeah.
is, it's a bit subjective, but that is what you mean. And for us is basically just pushing them to go out of comfort zone, because sometimes I have seen that entrepreneurs always, even their broader thinking also gets resource constrained. So they start first thinking that, okay, I have this much. Now let's me think what we can do with this resource. uh, my our approach is to just reverse it, saying that first, unconstrained, can you think through that, given the potential, given where you are, can you decide? One is the inspiration, but can you say that this is possible to get to this in 12 months, or this in 24 months, and then map the resources to it, not the other way around. Don't start with where you can go assuming that this is the resource, because if there is potential, and genuinely there is, credibly you can get there, possibly resources can be managed, and if not, you can later readjust where your goal, right? But don't get constrained in deciding your goal by starting with the resources first. So things like that, we want to kind of engage all the entrepreneurs we are working with, we engage very deeply on those dimensions.
Jishnu, and there are a couple of companies in your portfolio which have crossed 100 million ARR, right? One is Druva.
So in Nexus portfolio, quite a bit. Partly I'm either fully involved or partially involved.
Yeah.
Um, Druva, Kaltura, Ariaka is also in that line. Yeah, Postman should also not be too further behind. Things like that. So there are quite a few of the companies which are there, and yeah, for us, in a way, just um, again, like, basically, keep on working with the companies and hopefully helping them doing the best thing at one possible time. And these are the milestones which would happen. We necessarily, I definitely think that for most of the companies like Postman, for us, ARR is a lagging indicator. Like
Yeah,
among all the metrics that drives the company, I will definitely say that in most cases, it's not the ARR, which is the main goal. ARR, of course, is an important goal, but often like, ARR follows versus ARR driving, like, all key decisions.
but how market rewards and how other investors would follow Nexus would reward one this would be one of the key metrics.
No, it would be, but it would follow. So the problem is that, if at least from a company perspective, what you are saying
Yeah.
is outside in how people will look at. Yeah, I understand that. And at the end of the day, like, ARR becomes the metric for a lot of things, and the company is
Yeah.
going public and all that. But if you're building it out, every other day you can't think of ARR, because
Yes.
what leads to ARR is most important. And sometimes actually just being driven by ARR we will lead you to take a lot of suboptimal decisions,
Yeah.
and that can be harmful. So which is very important. It's like, in consumers also, we never drive any company based on GMV targets, never. Right? So here also it's kind of that, like, we always say, if you ask Abhinav, we will say that, he's not even thinking of ARR on a daily basis. ARR is a lagging indicator for him.
So what are the key indicators which you help the company drive? One you have already indicated in the Postman case, that is the number of users. What would be other indicators in case of your other company?
Usage more than number of users, like what people are using, how engaged people are, and all that. In terms of many foundational indicators, right? Product roadmap, like the product market fit. Based on market feedback, you have decided on product journey, and how has that evolved. Is that, like, if you're launching, suppose you had whatever product launch, product version launch, and all that, are those being used the way you thought it would be? Are these yielding? So there is lot of kind of, like, micro kind of feedback loops that you are always getting from the customers, and that is leading to, if you're thought of, like, so many customers you would need in Q3, I'm just saying, right? You would add, say, new 50 new customers. Where have you ended up on those goals? If you think that, now the next 12 months focus will be new SCV, not on the existing era, how you have
Yeah.
come on to those. So I think there, like what I'm saying is that, there's each company, by the way, and to your point, each company is quite different. How
Yeah.
Druva will be measuring and kind of coming up with all these OKRs, and Postman will be is quite different. um, and it's situation specific, and we do it kind of, like, on a regular cadence, definitely in every board meetings, and in many kind of discussions in between board meetings.
And how do you think about you know the next uh, age of SaaS companies? Do you have some blueprint on because each year it will be completely different. For example, when you explored or met Postman for the first time, and now currently 2020, what are the things you are seeing in the market right now on which SaaS entrepreneurs are innovating and building on?
So if you look at, right, I firmly believe, which also goes back to our thesis of India being the hybrid of China and Israel. I firmly believe the real kind of um, innovation coming out of India and startups coming out of India would be driven by uh, uh, product leadership, technology leadership, something that they are introducing into the market, and they are gaining leading position. I mean, it did not be a new thing that they're introducing, but whatever they come up with, they have to be leader in that. Druva, perfect example. I mean, they are hands down the best. They pioneered cloud data protection, and they are the best offering in the world today. Postman, not even a competitor, right? Similarly, Observe, killing it in many different dimensions. And again, these are all product driven innovation. The reason I wanted to emphasize is that, I mean, so there are two leverage points that you have in a startup, and more so when you are building out of India. One is, of
Yeah.
course, product leadership, right? And the
Yeah.
other part is, and this is not one versus other, rather both has to come in. The other part where you can use India is the operational efficiency. uh,
Yeah.
like, take, I mean, which is not our portfolio, but talk about what Girish has built in Freshworks. Fantastic. I mean, the way he has built his machine is like unimaginable, right? So I think a blend of two is the right thing, right? Where your innovation is not like, I mean, one way of saying is that, okay, there is an established category in US, let's say, right? And I will come up with maybe, a simpler product, which is fine, which offers 80% of the functionalities, but I can be able to sell at 1/5 of the cost. Now,
Yeah.
that is one approach. I can see that. And we have, several efforts and several companies out there. And the other approach is product leadership, where you are saying that, hey, I am coming up with a different approach, or I have come up with this product which is clearly, has a path to be the best in its category, right? And you need not define always a new category. I'm not saying that. But in the existing category, you have the potential to be the best. My view is that what I would love to see over the coming decade is the nice blend of the two, where you are coming up with that kind of global product leadership capability as you are building kind of product first companies, and marry that up, like build your engine, leveraging that operational efficiency that India can offer today, which is amazing, right? The level of, you call it inside sales, operations, support, and how the machine, everything can be integrated with product, it can be driven by data, all those things. How do you marry? So I'm looking forward to more startups with more product leadership, with even better operational efficiency, if that makes sense, and across sectors, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
we don't think about sectors, and we want to be surprised, and we want to be like, these are the things I think, entrepreneurs would have the best pulse if they are building something on certain sector or certain kind of functionality. That is because they would have experienced it themselves in some ways, right? So we keep a very open mind on sectors or functionalities and use cases. But I would love to see, like, great product leaders coming out of India, with which are backed by fantastic operational efficiency.
So, Jishnu, I have one message from Observe.AI founder as part of my podcast research. Pratik helped me get it. So, uh, Observe.AI, for our listeners, is a India US based company, and with GTM in San Francisco and engineering team in India. Nexus invested in a seed round and has been tremendously helpful with navigating the typical early stages challenges of India US setup. In the early days, Jishnu was instrumental in product feedback and positioning to help accelerate our product market fit. Given his understanding of the SaaS GTM, he was able to set us up our initial GTM team in US, help us decide the right sales motion, inside versus field, channel versus direct. Jishnu has a great sense for SaaS metrics, and he has made sure the company starts tracking these metrics from very early days. That's a very profound feedback, Jishnu. Like, almost like you are the co-founder, one of the co-founders in a company. How do you get so much of your bandwidth for each company to invest in?
Honestly, it's very kind of Swapnil to say this. Honestly, I feel that as my role as venture capitalist, and which is true for all of us at Nexus, is really kind of like, doing proactive thinking and asking the right questions. I mean, I always tell, and Swapnil will tell you that, none of these I can decide, because I don't understand, like, Swapnil, Sharath, and Akash, the level they understand their business, right? I don't
Yeah.
even understand 1/10 of that. But what I force myself to do is that, take an approach, common sense oriented approach. Look at the business as you would see as a businessman, and maybe, like, with my, whatever understanding I might have developed over the last decade working with so many companies and all that. And then, can you ask the right questions? So that's what I do. And some of the things I might have strong views on, I always tell my entrepreneurs that please push back, because which is also very important, and which, Swapnil does all the time, like, so I think that's the interaction, that it is not so much about, to your point, so that it is not so much about the time involvement. I mean, I won't necessarily say that, I'm spending a lot of time with Observe, not in that way, but it's kind of like, whatever time you are spending, is it right? And sometimes I also ask myself, see, what happens is that I'm on the board, right? For any company, I'm on the board. Naturally, there is a kind of a de jure influence. I hate
Yeah.
that kind of de jure influence. I want de facto influence. By that, what I oh, okay. So by de jure influence, I meant that since you are a board member,
Yeah.
you are saying something. That means it is important, right?
Yeah.
It's not the right approach. It's not the right philosophy that an entrepreneur should follow, or not the right culture that the board member should foster. Board
Yeah.
member should say something that is inherently de facto, which means that the board member has very good understanding of what they're talking about, right? They have kind of like, internally internalized, so that they know that if they're giving an advice, it is actually relevant for the company at that stage, right? And that's something that can be considered by the management team and the entrepreneur, not to be followed. And once it is considered, once they internalize it, of course, I mean, they would go into a discussion with it, and sometimes they will accept it, sometimes they won't, right? So I think that philosophy, I really, really always remind myself that, and that's how kind of like, I try to help the companies. And I think, that's the best. And always there is a learning. I'm learning every day. The level of learning I'm having from my entrepreneurs. I'm so blessed for this job, honestly. I mean, it's like, every day is a learning opportunity, and excellent people. And if I can have, you know any positive influence in their journey, I mean, nothing beats that.
And Jishnu, you might be getting 100 SaaS company pitches every year. Am I right, or more than that?
Yeah, as a team, we are getting more than that. Yeah.
So how do you pick up the select two which you decide that you are going to work with them? Because each year you pick only one or two investments to work as a board member.
So, yeah, I mean, of course, this is probably something, we are learning every year. And um, so I will say, first thing first is entrepreneur. I mean, as much as we want to say other things, is it's not, and much of that is what is not said versus what is said.
Yeah.
Pitch pitch deck and all that are kind of just collaterals, which are not, I mean, which are good to have, important to have, but those are not the decision makers. It's really the person, like, what drives the person, what really kind of like, why somebody is doing what they're doing. Of course, they would need to have the smarts, a complementary founding team. I find that, 2 to 3 people team are probably the best. Beyond that, it become like one is maybe too few, and beyond three sometimes becomes a challenge. So things like that. And then, resonance. If I can't resonate with what their vision is, then I conclude that, I won't be the right venture capitalist for them. So I need to resonate. Sometimes I am actually learning for the first time also. It's not that I need to know always a space before I invest in it, not that way. But I push myself to kind of very quickly come up to speed on at least the basics of what is happening. And can I relate to the entrepreneur? Can I add to in his journey? This is something, I ask after I get sold, that, this is the entrepreneur I need to work with. And yeah, and that is true for all Nexus entrepreneurs. I also look up to my partner's feedback, my colleagues' feedback on the entrepreneur. Sometimes, I have inspiration on the space, and that also can lead to me drinking my own Kool-Aid, because I
Yeah.
think that, the space is great, and which might be true. But the point is, you need, much more important is the entrepreneur who need to deliver. And that's why I actually count upon my colleagues who may not be as familiar with me on the space, to just look at the entrepreneur, just focus on the entrepreneur and wear their business hat, that they're all businessmen at some level. They're all technologists at some level. So just hear them and give me the feedback on how you feel if you are meeting that person for the first time. So that's how kind of like, we as a team, we become more effective than what we are as individual investors. And, we practice it every day, and we want to foster that culture internally.
Thank you so much, Jishnu. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast. It's great to hear a very different and fresh perspective on on how you are thinking of building new age SaaS companies, right? And helping entrepreneurs along the journey.
Thank you very much, Siddharth. You're doing an excellent job. Doing, like, I've heard some of your such series and sessions, and keep up the great work. And yeah, we look forward to collaborate with you.
Thank you so much, Jishnu.